You're listening to Factual America.
So let's bring this more up to the current time, because we couldn't even begin to touch on everything that Stewart Brand has had his hands in. But as you said early on, the sort of the especially as part of the story arc, it's all about this de-extinction movement that Stewart is now part of. And David, maybe you could explain that, and then maybe even why that was the focus of the film, besides the fact that it's what Stewart's focusing on now.
If your viewers see the film, they'll know basically it's essentially Jurassic Park, right? It comes with all the moral quandaries and arguments and interesting opportunities that Jurassic Park came with, and why it's such a great story. Except for dinosaurs, there's no DNA remaining from those animals. They've deceased way too long ago. But there is a lot of DNA for animals that we've killed off ourselves as humans. So woolly mammoth or the Tasmanian tiger. There's actual museums around the world that have flesh specimens of these animals. Well, I don't need to explain to your viewers, that there's DNA in there, that we can collect that DNA, we can sequence it, we can figure out what it said. Well, if we can piece enough of those together and combine them with other proximate species, we could, in theory, once you solve a bunch of bioengineering problems that would come with giving birth to one of these animals, you could, in theory, create a population of animals that are big enough to support themselves and go back into the ecosystem that they once were. And so when you think about an animal like the Tasmanian tiger that was once an apex predator for its region, there's been no replacement for it. It's just become a less robust system since we humans have killed off that animal. So what if we introduce the apex predator of the Tasmanian tiger back to it? Wouldn't the ecosystem just start to go back to the way it was? It might be a little bit different, but the answer, some say, is yes. We'd basically be in the process of repairing those ecosystems. So, it's essentially a conservation, an ecosystem repair effort, and it comes with all those delicious problems that Jurassic Park came with, which is like, well, you don't know the unintended consequences. What's gonna happen? Things have changed so much. Isn't the animal different enough from the original animal? And we don't know what will happen there. And there's all these questions that are worth asking. And how do you how do politics work with this? I mean, do we have to regulate this? Who's doing this? Who's deciding which animals get de-extincted and to what ecosystems they are returned? So we're entering a century of biotech, and the world's going to change as dramatically and probably more than the world changed with the Industrial Revolution. And so, we're going to have conversations about these topics. And so Jason and our hope with this film is that the film kind of helps people start those conversations. Should we be doing this? Should we not be doing this? What does it look like? And so on.
Well, I think that's a very good point. It brings me to the next question I wanted to ask you, because as we all know, any great documentary, you definitely have the main subject, but most great documentaries are about something else, really, when it comes down to it. And so I wanted to ask both of you, and we can start with Jason, since we haven't asked you a question in a little while. What do you see as this film really being all about? Is it about hubris? Is it about folly? What do you think?
Well, yeah, we hope the film has many meanings, because it's a mirror of Stewart Brand, who's a complicated character. Stewart is a guy that you can't easily pigeonhole and say, oh, you do this one thing really well. He's lived an extraordinary life. And so in keeping with Stewart Brand's varied, extraordinary life, from counterculture to environmentalism to hackers to biotech, we want this film to touch on many issues. But I think, in a way, the one common thread that every chapter of Stewart life touches goes back to that original title of the movie, which is "We Are as Gods." As David so eloquently put when he gave his description of the title, but every element of Stewart's life, from counterculture taking acid and having a revolution of mind, that's acting as a god. Being environmentalist, knowing that you can control the fate of the oceans and the tides and the weather, that is being a god. computers, you have the ability to actually take code and manifest, computer technology that actually changes your physical reality. That's acting like a god. And then biotech itself is playing with life, the code of life, the same way that the hackers played with the computer code. That is acting like a god. So we think this is, it's sort of, catching people up to the power that we currently have when we all feel so sort of neutered and aimless, that we actually have this ability to be gods. So I think if the film had to be boiled down to its quintessence, it would have to go back to the title.